players gather to cast powerful spells, some of the oldest and most powerful in the history of Magic the Gathering. Wildfire, Donate, Morphling, and many others. Battling head-to-head in brutal combat, they all have one thing in common: to uphold their legacy and the search for eternal glory.
The Eternal Glory podcast is brought to you by the minds behind BoshNRoll on YouTube, ThrabenU University, and theepicstorm.com.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Eternal Glory podcast. This is episode number 56, Return of the Mailbag. I'm Phil Gallagher, joined as always by Bryant Cook and Brian Coval. How are you all doing tonight? Today, it's mid-afternoon for a change, actually.
Yeah, pretty strange, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is weird. We normally record on Tuesday nights. It's currently Sunday afternoon, right after lunch. I could still taste my lunch in my mouth right now. And I was in the middle of recording a video. I'm actually 3 rounds into a league right now and have it on pause. And I'll play the other 2 rounds when we're done. Just feeling totally weird about this, but we're going to get into it.
Phil, want to make a prop bet?
What's the prop bet?
I asked
Let's
Phil,
go.
but if Brian 5-0s this league, do you want to make a bet on this?
Oh, I'll bet that Bryant does not 5-0 the league.
Well, I'm not playing a league, but I will bet that Brian does. I think that he's a very powerful wizard.
All right, bet. Brian, what is your record currently?
That would have been a good place to start. I'm 2-1 in the league already.
You said that you were 3-0.
No, I said
He said he was 3 rounds
into a league.
Oh. I
Get
misheard.
wrecked.
Well, pay
Oh.
up, sucker. All right, that was a good start.
All right, I'll start out with real life stuff. So last episode I mentioned that I started playing D&D. That's been really fun. So we played last night until, I don't know, I think a little after midnight or something like that. And since basically, 4 of the 6 of us are teachers that all work at the same school, and we all have Monday off, and our significant others randomly do as well. So we're also squeezing in a bonus Monday session, which I'm super hyped about. It's been weird. I have to fight all of my instincts to not just try to do the most broken possible thing all of the time. It's hard because that's how my brain thinks, and it's nope, this is role playing first, that stuff second.
What level are you playing at that broken interactions are possible?
We just leveled up to 12 yesterday.
Oh, wow. Yeah. My campaigns usually cap out at 9. We just don't go into the big stuff.
Oh yeah, we're about to go to the underworld. We're working for gods. We're probably about to try and kill a god. Question mark, question mark, question mark. It's gotten kind of intense. I joined this campaign I think more than a year into it from when it originally started. So it's been long running. My girlfriend has maybe been playing for, I don't know, 6 months or something like that at this point. And she was a very late comer into it. So
yeah, that's fair. My GM just is he has a particular way he wants the game to be played and want it to feel, which I suppose is the GM's prerogative. And if I didn't like it, I would leave. But he does want role play forward, and he doesn't want us being super broken. And he will usually wrap up a campaign as we approach level 10, just to make sure we don't get into the 36 combat action kind of insanity stuff. Speaking of which, my D&D campaign seems to be coming to kind of an abrupt end. It seems like the GM is just kind of bored running the game and wants to go run a different one, which is fine because real life is coming back. But I forget it's Ghosts of Saltmarsh is what we're doing, which the theme is you're in a port and you're all pirates and you can sail out the ship and just end up at all of the greatest hits dungeons through D&D's history, and then you go back to port and then go run a different famous dungeon. And there's some politics back at the port that you're supposed to be influencing one way or the other. And it sounds like we're just not going to do any of that. We're just going to run this gigantic dungeon and then be done. So it's not quite what was advertised, but at the same time, I don't mind because I would like my Friday nights back now that we can do stuff.
Bryant, how are things on your end?
I don't know. I didn't put anything for life updates because I feel like we just recorded and nothing in my life changes. I don't know. Sad.
Time is a blur. Yep, gotcha. All right, Brian, anything else you want to mention in our intro here? What else is up?
I am 2 full weeks into my school year at this point, and I'm basically looking for any reason to leave this job at this point. It's basically like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to be awake right now. It's 5:30. Why am I getting up at 5:30? I don't need to do this if I don't want to. Like, I could go full-time content, but I applied to not quite a competitor because I work at a school and this would be like a home-based therapy thing, but I applied to a place that runs primarily virtually, and they consider 18 hours full-time for salary and benefits, and then you could stack extra hours for extra money. But if I can work 18 hours a week and still have health insurance, that's a good deal for me at the place I am in my life right now. So application was sent on Friday afternoon. Hoping to hear something next week. Start to explore some options.
All right. Have we flown through this portion of the intro already? In that case,
yeah, life is slow.
Yeah. Thank you very much to Ryan O'Lowlin for donating to keep the old podcast running and to keep our editor at Force of Phil well fed and happy.
Do you know this person? I would definitely pronounce that O'Loughlin.
Oh, I'm not super familiar with pronunciation naming conventions with those sorts of last names.
That looks very Irish, Scottish, like that part of the world, where Lachlan, I believe, is how you would say that.
Yeah, if it's like Greco-Roman, I've got you covered, and if it's not, questionable at best.
Yeah, the Greco-Roman O'Lowlin, famous last name, Caesar O'Lowlin. I imagine that's O'Loughlin, but either way, Ryan, thank you for your donation.
All right. As far as Magic stuff goes, I have some super cool videos coming up that I'm excited about. So someone sent me a Magecraft aggro deck list and said, hey, I have this general idea. I've been doing this in Modern. Can you do this in Legacy? And I said, you bet. And I put together a like aggro combo version of a Magecraft deck that like actually just like fired off and did the thing surprisingly well for a brew. So I'm really looking forward to that coming out. You know it's a good one when like you have to do a gatherer search in order to build the deck. Like that's when you know you're dipping deep into the fun stuff. And I've also got a league with what is almost a mono white humans deck, but like also has meddling mage coming up. That ended up being really fun.
Yeah, I've definitely seen some of those lists floating on Twitter from Eddie Zamora, if you're familiar with him.
Yo, so easy. I keep losing to that deck. Since you mentioned it, I like see Yorion and I'm like, okay, we're playing against Death and Taxes, and then they're like Aether Vial. I'm like, okay, yep, confirmed, and then they're like Meddling Mage. I'm like, what the shit? We're dead.
My eyes, so to skip ahead a little bit, my eyes almost bugged out yesterday. I was 4-0 in the Legacy Super PTQ, and I got paired against Medvedev, if you're familiar with them at all. They are well known for playing 8 forces in their Delver deck. And I immediately sighed when I saw their name, and then they revealed Yorion. And I was just like, oh my god, they're playing Death and Taxes. It was a pretty big change.
I had a Urza Echo League that I recorded, and I got paired into Monkeys Can't Cry, who's just... I queue into them all the time. They're near the top of the trophy board. They're always on Blue-Red Delver. And...
Ethan? Ethan's a Doomsday guy.
Every time I've queued into Monkeys Can't Cry, they're on Blue-Red Delver. In the queues. Like, on the challenges, they might have a different thing, but it's Blue-Red Delver.
Okay.
Pretty sure I've played against them on camera 4 times on Blue-Red Delver. And I was like, okay, we're playing against Blue-Red Delver. This is going to be tough. I had this, like, Echo or Bust opening hand. And he went, Fetch for Savannah, Elvish Reclaimer. And I was like, ooh, this was not the round to experiment. And I just fucking echoed him into the earth. So that was fun.
All right, Brian, how about you?
I had a really cool opportunity. It was a cash playoff with Kai Sawatarix on Twitch and Twitter and everywhere. It was sponsored by someone who's been extremely generous in supporting my channel over the last year and a half or so. And they put up 500 of their own dollars for us to play 5 rounds of Bant versus Doomsday. And the winner of each match got $100. And that was a ton of fun. It was high level content. My brain was just a puddle at the end of it because we just did 5 in a row. We didn't take a break or anything. Kai was live streaming it, so it wasn't like I could piece it together later on YouTube. It was just best of 3, queue up best of 3 for about 3.5 hours. And it was a lot of fun. I ended up going 3-2, got paid, felt good. And that donor has another one coming. I'll be playing best of 5 for $500 against Max Dorshin. He'll be on his build of Jeskai Ragavan with the Dragon Rage Channeler, NBC Rag, or whatever it's called. And I'll be on Bant again. So we're doing that. We're recording that piecemeal over the next week, a little more sustainable pace, because he's an adult with kids and a job and stuff, and I have a job, and we'll be recording like 1 round a night over the next week and drop the videos probably shortly after this podcast goes live.
That's super awesome.
Yeah, really great content, really great feedback from the community, and an excuse for me to like really dial in and try hard on the channel compared to the donation decks where I'm usually just trying to have some fun. Oh, awesome testing, which is helpful because the Legacy Pit Open is coming up. It's just 2 weeks away at this point, slightly less because it's Sunday and it's on Saturday. And I'll be at that, assuming that the world doesn't shut down in the next 2 weeks. But it certainly seems like America is just all steam forward, no matter what. Just booster shots, wear your mask, we don't care, get out there, do stuff. So I will be at that, masked up appropriately. And I'm looking forward to it. I have been working really hard trying to close the gaps in Bant's game plan, because I do love Bant. It is the deck that I think I'm going to do best with, even though I do think that Blue-Red Delver is better in a vacuum. I think that my reps with Bant are going to be the best thing for me, and I'm trying to close the gaps. I made some updates, some things I wanted to try this week, and recorded a 5.0 video with my new tech. And the league I'm in right now, in the middle of this podcast, is an updated version of that. So working hard on that technology for the Legacy Pit. Bryant, you're coming to that too, right?
I will be there. What I wanted to ask you was, you said that you just recorded a video and now you're recording that video again. So I have this fear for my own channel of publishing similar decks too frequently. Do you have that?
That's kind of a mix. For like a signature deck, like I think I could release Sharkstill 5 times a week and my personal viewers would love it. For like Bant, I have a playlist of like BoshNRoll signature decks that are like real decks that I actually care about versus the donation decks that I care about insofar as I want to have fun and make good content. But like I think my signature decks I can release a little more often. And also I massage my queue pretty aggressively. Like I have a 3-week buffer. If I died right now, you would still get 3 weeks more videos just releasing every day at 10 a.m. And I also have a gigantic queue out from there. I have like another 4 or 5 weeks of things I need to still record. So I can just like record today, release it 6 weeks from now, and fill in the gaps in between with other stuff. Like I massage it pretty hard. I do not release linearly how I record.
So like the deck I'm probably playing the most right now is Madness, and I try not to release the same thing more than once in a week, but I will absolutely release a Madness video every week, for example, and like that's no big deal. People have tended to like it a lot. But when I was recording, say, like Mono Death and Taxes content all the time, that wasn't exciting for most people.
Yeah, you have to be invested in Death and Taxes to watch that more than once.
D&T leagues are also just like a grind. I can't imagine wanting to do that over and over and over and over.
It's very intellectually rewarding, but also draining. And I don't miss playing 3-hour leagues. I can tell you that.
I remember a conversation we had, the three of us. We had just wrapped up recording a podcast or whatever, or maybe we were gearing up to record one, And Bryant was like, yeah, I'm just going to record a video real quick. And it was like, we're recording in like an hour and 10 minutes. You're starting something now. And you're like, yeah, how long does the league take? And like Phil being the D&T guy, me being the Bant Shark Still guy, we're like 3 hours. and Brian's like, no, I could blast one out in like an hour. Like, oh, okay. Good for you. Whatever, man.
This is life of a combo player.
Yeah, and like I was saying about massaging my queue, like if I only have an hour and 10 minutes, I'll be like, oh, I got a Ruby Storm deck that I'm releasing 3 weeks from now. I'll just record it now, schedule it for 3 weeks out, and check something off. And I do that as well. That Urza Echo League I was talking about was a, like, I got 90 minutes right now. What can I get done quickly?
I had a tutoring session last Thursday at 8 p.m. I started recording a Belcher League at 7:10 and finished it before the tutoring session. I was like, hell yeah. I was pretty pumped about that one.
Very nice. My last Magic update was one of my friends organized what's called the Yinzer Draft Open. Yinzers are Pittsburgh slang for those of you elsewhere in the world, because in the Pittsburgh dialect, the collective you, like a group of you, like you all, y'all, yous, is yins. So anyone who says yins is a yinzer. That's what we refer to local Pittsburghers as. So the Yinzer Draft Open occurred, and it was $100 entry, 16 players. We drafted we drafted Adventures of the Forgotten Realm, then we drafted Strixhaven, then there was a top 8 Dominaria draft, and the winner got a Tropical Island, the second place got a Taiga, and everyone got a prize. So it was a pretty high power event, like good way to spend a Saturday. I did not regrettably make the top 8, but it was a lot of fun. It was also at the host's house, which has like a pool and a bar, and we ordered pizza, and there was like a massage chair. It was like this incredible just day of hanging out playing Magic. Got some EDH in between rounds. It was just, you need that to recharge once in a while when you're just on the content grind or like crunching legacy result data and like complaining about Ragavan, like all that other shit that just burns your rope. It's just like, yeah, just go draft with your friends 3 times a day and play EDH and swim in between rounds. That's a good day of Magic.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Those recharge days are so important. That's what yesterday was for me. I went over to my friend's house, who was also the DM for our D&D campaign. I went over there at like 2, played Smash Bros for like 4 hours, had dinner, played D&D till 12 or 1 in the morning. It's just like, okay, I feel good now. The weight of the world has lifted a bit.
I know Bryant watches Ted Lasso, but there was a scene in a recent episode where the captain of the soccer team was in a funk, and the coach took him to like the neighborhood soccer pitch and was just like, get out there, fuck around, play soccer for fun. Like these are just like neighborhood people. Forget about winning, forget about your salary, forget about your sponsors, just go play soccer. And it defunked him. And like, I feel that now. I feel that energy. That's exactly how last weekend felt for me.
I am glad you're watching Ted Lasso. It's so fucking good.
It really is one of the best things on TV right now.
So last week I top 8'd a local 2K with the Epic Storm, and I literally like lost in top 8, grabbed my bag, grabbed my winnings for the store credit, went home, picked up my wife, and we drove to the Adirondack Mountains where I had no cell phone connection for the night. We drove home. We got home Sunday at like 4:30 in the afternoon, and I had finally gotten internet connection again. Once we got home, I was driving, so I couldn't look at my phone. And there's just like dozens and dozens of messages being like, you haven't been online, everything okay? Like stuff like that. And like, you haven't responded to any Discord messages. And I was just like, wow, people are really concerned if I'm like dead or not after like, 24 hours of not being connected. It was kind of weird.
Yeah, I'm really good at not creating that suspicion because I'm really terrible at responding to anything anyway. I'm just really busy. I honestly feel bad some amount of the time that I have this really awesome active Discord community and I see them like talking to each other all day, every day. And I usually pop in like on the toilet or right before bed. And I just respond to as many things as I can, like throw as many like thumbs up or BoshNRoll emotes as I can to things that have been said. And then I fall asleep. I really need to make time to just like play EDH with them or something. I keep wanting to just like jump in the the voice channel, go live, stream Storybook Ball, and just hang out or whatever. But man, there's no time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm pretty active in the Storm Discord. They pushed me to make the new Epic Storm mini token pack, which was one of my updates. It's out. I've sold a bunch of them already, like at least like 70. So if you want one, they're selling pretty quickly. Definitely go get one. And the big thing that they pushed me for was adding in AVE tokens, so that way you don't have to fumble around with dice. They're already a 2/2, a 3/3, etc. So they're pretty cool.
How big did you make them?
All the way up to an 11/11.
All right, pretty strong.
Yeah.
I like it. What happens when your opponent dresses down in response to that, though?
I've been told
Your
that dress
tokens are wrong.
down doesn't do. I don't know. Like, people have been giving me varied information. Like, Honorog had the stream where he's like, dress down kills all the AVE tokens. AVE sucks.
It doesn't do that. It just makes them 2/2s.
Okay. Yeah, but like then people on my videos are like, no, that's inaccurate. Like, dress down doesn't do anything. Like, I honestly just don't know. If it ever happens, I'm just going to call a judge.
Yeah, dress down. The rules, if something affects how something would be when it comes into play, the rules look at the object as it would exist in play when making decisions as it enters play. That's why, like, Urborg, your shock land comes into play untapped without paying 2 life. It's just a mountain, and the game sees it will be a mountain before you have to make any decisions about what a mountain would do. So dress down does just nuke Stone Coil Serpent, Walking Ballista. All your AV tokens will be 2/2s. Like, that's just how that works.
Okay.
But yeah, call a judge. That's always a good plan.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to. And like, I know some people get really hurt, like butt hurt when your opponent calls a judge. Like, if I'm calling a judge, I probably just don't know how something works. Like, it's something against you. That, or you're playing super slow and I want to force you to play faster. So that is on you. You'd be offended.
Yeah, for sure. My Rules of Legacy video I posted a few weeks back. That's like one of the first things I say before I've been talking about any Legacy rules. I'm just like, calling a judge doesn't make you a jerk. Your opponent's not a jerk if they call a judge. Just do it. Shut up.
Yeah.
We want to play correctly.
My last update was I've had a bunch of people complaining about the Epic Storm loading slowly. There was this issue we had, so we reverted to an old database, and that's made the issue even worse. So as we talk right now, I am on a live chat support with my hosting company trying to get this problem solved. So my apologies to anyone that felt like the site loaded slowly. It's probably going to be fixed by the time this is live, hopefully, knocking on wood. And yeah.
All right, let's just hop into things then. So this is a mailbag episode, so we're going to be seeing a little bit of everything. We've tried to group them together at least a little bit topically, so there's some amount of flow, but, you know, you get what you get. And here we go. The first one is from Jack D, who asks, what are the defining characteristics of fair versus unfair decks in Legacy? And I have a stock response that I give when someone asks about fair and unfair decks. And my starting point for this conversation is any good Legacy deck is at least a little bit unfair. And sometimes it's more of an honest fair, and you're just like cheating on mana with something like an Ancient Tomb or an Ether Vial. And sometimes you're fully down that unfair spectrum of like, I am trying to kill you on turn 1 with my Goblin Charbelcher or my Thassa's Oracle.
Yeah, my answer to that would be, how many games do you plan for, or how many turns do you plan for a game to last? Or how many turns will it take you to reduce your opponent's life total to 0? Like, or, you know, whatever your win con is. Like, I think anyone who's like attacking, blocking, engaging in combat, and like attack you 7 times from 20 with my 3/1 creature, that's a fair deck. If like I want to play 1 turn like Belcher, or I want to play any number of turns but win in all at once like Omnitel, I think the number of turns it takes to win, either total game count or over what number of turns does it take you to actually kill your opponent, that's what I would be looking at for fair or unfair.
I often use the fundamental turn instead. Like
I'd agree with that.
For a lot of decks, the game is decided by, say, turn 3 if you are an unfair deck. And sometimes that's because, like, you have pushed the advantage hard enough where the game is over, you know? when Red Prison has a crazy start and goes like Rabble Master into Rabble Master into Rabble Master or something like that, or maybe one fewer Rabble Master, but like they go Rabble Master into Rabble Master and you don't have an answer for it. Like that game is over. It might take 2 more combat steps to end it or something, but the damage is done at that point.
Wow, we're getting into it on the first question. I think Red Prison is a fair deck. Like I think that Goblin Rabble Master, where your opponent and you can see, even if it happens quickly, even if it happens ahead of curve, it's just like, okay, I'm taking 1 this turn, I'm taking 4 next turn, like you can math out your life total as a resource, what answers you have, try to line things up over multiple turns. Like to me, unfair is like, oh, they untapped with Wishclaw Talisman, we're done. Or Show and Tell resolved, we're done. That's just where I am with that.
Yeah, I consider that deck like borderline. Like you're pushing it. You're not to like full all in degenerate combo or anything, but
I think the fundamental turn thing is very interesting because I think the fundamental turn exists between 2 decks in which there's a key turn that matters and it's likely going to define the rest of the game. For example, Dreadhorde Arcanist Legacy, the fundamental turn was solidly turn 2. Like that was the turn that mattered the most in the game. And it really depends on what the matchup is and like the format average in a way. But my answer for fair versus unfair is a little bit different. Brian and I have had a little bit of a heated exchange in the past on this, but I think it's also often defined by like the number of free spells in a way. But there's a large number of new free spells in the game. They create sometimes unfair characteristics, but that doesn't mean that they're unfair decks. For example, in Modern, there's this elemental deck where you're cheating in a 4/4 into play that's going to kill all of your opponent's creatures, and then it does the same thing on the next turn. That's a little bit unfair. That said, the elementals deck also wins sort of slowly. Like it's not a deck that's going to kill you on turn 3, but it's doing unfair things. So I think there's likely a greater thing that matters, and it's not just like your deck is either fair or unfair, and that's the lines.
Yeah, I would agree that being black and white, this deck is fair or unfair, isn't helpful in high power formats like Modern and Legacy. But at the same time, you all just got your money's worth because we gave you 3 totally different answers. So pick your favorite and enjoy that. Thanks, Jack D. The next question, and I'll just lob this one right over to Phil, is from Mize Gomez, I think. That's how that's pronounced. In your opinion, what would need to happen for Eldrazi Stompy, Dragon Stompy, and other non-blue Chalice decks to make a comeback?
So in the past, I don't know, maybe it's 4 years at this point, Prison has really fallen out as a strategy. We've gotten an additional Force of Will effect that makes the turn 1 Chalice wins less likely to happen. We have gotten Force of Vigor, which is, a pitch answer to these things. We've gotten better answers than we've ever had to Chalice of the Void that are main deckable. It used to be like, oh, okay, this is a bug deck, so my Chalice isn't good here. And now it's like, oh, this is a deck with Prismatic Ending, my Chalice isn't good here. Or this deck has Teferi, and the list goes on and on and on. And Legacy decks are also closing games faster than they've done in the past. You might have the game locked down for 10 turns, and then your opponent plays an 8/8 Murktide Regent, and you're like, oh shit, I'm dead in 2 turns to that. I don't have an out to this right now. Like that's the end. Go ahead.
The Murktide thing is, I can relate to that sometimes because I'll be like masterfully crafting this turn, then I'm going to set up a Galvanic Relay, and then on the following turn I'll untap, and there's like 8/8 Murktide, and I'm like, oh fuck, my plan just like went right down the drain. So I feel that.
So if the Chalice decks are going to compete with the, assorted blue decks that they used to kind of prey on, they need greater redundancy and consistency than what they have now, and that's really hard in the non-cantrip decks. I also don't think we're super likely to get too many cards that super power up these sorts of decks. I don't think we're going to get another, colorless Chalice of the Void sort of card with a different name and slightly different effect.
Whoa. I'm going to pause you there. I think that you will get those effects. They're just not as common as other printings. Like, I'm not saying that this is a perfect example, but Brian has strong opinions on Void Mirror. That is the type of card, like, it's not main deckable, but like those effects could come out like once every few blocks. Like at some point, one of them is going to be playable, right?
Sure. We got Sorcerer's Spyglass, 5 years ago?
And 2 more times since then. Yeah, but Magic design is at a place right now where they want people to play Magic, contrary to how it seemed for a number of years in the early days. Like printing cards like Force of Will, Thorn of Amethyst, Sphere of Resistance, Tangle Wire, and cards like that. Like Thorn of Amethyst was in Lorwyn because it was a creature set, and like this is a pretty safe place to drop this in. Lorwyn also gave us like Gaddock Teague, so they were experimenting with some ways to interact with spell decks with your creature deck, which made sense thematically for a block without breaking standard. But a card like Chalice of the Void, it would have to show up in a Commander set or a Modern Masters or Modern Horizons, because that's just not how they make cards anymore. We're not going to get a Trinisphere in a standard legal Trinisphere variant ever, which I think I'm okay with. They want people to cast spells, attack, and block.
I would find it more likely that the Hate Bear style decks continue to get better at a rate that is acceptable than that the prison decks would continue to get better. Like there are Hate Bears of all kinds, all varieties, and occasionally a few of them slip into Legacy, even if they're just like sideboard or metagame options.
I have 2 thoughts on this. And the first was, when you look at a deck like Eldrazi Stompy, those cards were legal for years, a very long time, that just like outside of red aggro Stompy, didn't really see a whole lot of play. And then Eldrazi happened, and those creatures were aggressive enough and they were large enough that they pushed the boundary into making this deck a new archetype, and I hated it. Screw Eldrazi. But they were disruptive enough too because they had Thought Not Seer. I think potentially maybe a new tribe or whatever, like Eldrazi, that are even bigger and stronger and more disruptive could also like have that sort of effect, because the disruption just wasn't artifacts like Chalice of the Void and Trinisphere, which is my next point. Part of the reason I hate Karn so much is that it's so difficult to answer. It's not an artifact. It's a planeswalker. It has a lot of loyalty. You can't bounce it with a Hurkyl's Recall or hit it with Abrupt Decay. So non-disruptive permanents like Karn could make those decks come back if they weren't just like 2-mana artifacts that get blown up by Force of Vigor or Prismatic Ending. So more effects like that would make my life miserable, but that's what those decks would need.
Well, that would make your life miserable, but let me tell you, I board out Karns a lot. Because when your opponent is playing something like a Delver deck, it's just like, oh
when
shit,
they have
this Karn
any
does
creature
nothing.
in their deck. Yeah, frequently, like, yeah, we don't need to get back into the Monostorm perspective of Legacy again. But yeah, like Karn is specifically very good against a deck like Storm for sure. But the prison aggro decks these days are like humans primarily. Like that's where you want to be. That blue-white Meddling Mage deck that someone mentioned earlier this episode, like Meddling Mage and the 3/1 Paulo, whatever that card's called, Thalia, like those. That's just a better way to play decks like this.
All right,
we spent a lot of time on that easy question. We're gonna have to pick this up.
Yeah, we said in the show notes, should we cut that question? And I was like, no, I can answer it in like 2 or 3 sentences. Anyway.
Yeah, great.
All
right.
Next one is from James Shu, who says, Today modern innovations feed into legacy meta development, both literally from sets like Modern Horizons and the work done by various format grinders. How would you suggest players stay tuned into the legacy format in 2021, and how is this different from a few years ago? I'll start here with a few years ago. So, a few years ago, if you watched the Star City Opens on the weekend and you read a handful of articles that came out during the week and maybe browsed the source a little bit, you were very well informed. And now things are totally different.
Yeah, a lot of it's now looking over like deck dumps and staying in tune with like Magic Twitter, which is pretty toxic, but that's where a lot of the information is being released. A lot of it's private nowadays. It's in, segmented discords where people are keeping their innovations hidden, unlike the source where you could read what people were doing from other archetypes, and it made you, more in tune with how people were trying to beat you, that sort of thing. And that's just not really how things are anymore.
a weird amount of it goes down in places like, you know, Facebook chats and stuff like that, people's private like Patreon, Discord servers and such. You have to hunt for the information that you want a little bit harder than you used to. And also,
Joe Dyer's content is great. Like, he really does scrape all of the major events, give you the data of who's playing what, if you want that sort of thing. And there's a giant fork in this question, which we've talked about on the podcast before, which is, are you staying in tune with Magic Online Legacy? Like, are you trying to win Super PTQ on Magic Online? Or are you trying to top 8 your local event? Because those are completely different questions. Where, like, on Magic Online, you have to beat Ragavan Delver, because that's tier 0, and everything skews off of that in one way or another. And in your local meta, like my local meta, I mentioned there were as many Jeweled Lotus as Delver of Secrets in the last Legacy tournament I played in locally. And, like, you just need to, like, what do you want to be in tune to? Do you want to have just a reasonable, powerful thing? Honestly, if you just play Legacy once a month at your local, build Ragavan Delver, build the Izzet deck, and just farm everyone. There's a lot of levels to this.
all right. So our next question is from Tamarok, who asks, are there any general Legacy sideboarding principles that have improved your outcomes?
This could be a whole episode.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'll basically just sum this up quickly as just knowing your role is what matters. Knowing what your opponent's trying to do and your best way to counter it or do your own thing in spite of it. Like, people who think that, like, surgical extraction is the famous example. It's like, hashtag don't surgical that is an entire Twitter thing. When people are just like, fatal push your Tarmogoyf and then surgical extract it, it's like, okay, I win now. Like, knowing what's important is what matters, and part of that is knowing what other decks are doing as well as knowing what your own deck is doing. Just know the format, know your role, and stick to it.
I've got one that I really developed once I started doing a lot of donation deck lists, and that's understanding how a card works differently in two different decks. A card like Veil of Summer doesn't always do the same thing. So, for example, you might be using Veil of Summer to protect yourself from discard, or you might be using Veil of Summer to, like, set up a turn where you can successfully resolve a show and tell. And understanding that, like, a card has multiple uses, and that sometimes the use case from one deck doesn't transfer over well. So, for example, if you are a, like, green mid-range tap out, I have, you know, things going up the curve until 5, are you actually going to have the mana to cast that Veil of Summer that you put in your sideboard? No, probably not. So I'd say, like, making sure you really understand what a card is doing in your deck is really important. Because I have a lot of leagues where I play, and I look at the sideboard, and I go, like, okay, now that I've played a round or two with this deck, I just know I will literally never sideboard in these two cards.
I'd rather under sideboard than over sideboard. I think too many people in this game over sideboard.
For sure.
All right, so the next question is from Andy R. And I know that Brian's fired up to respond to this one. Since the three of
I'm
you
coming in hot.
Since the three of you are eternal Magic enthusiasts and Legacy is in a bad state since Wizards of the Coasts fucks up the format for sales, why don't the three of you try out pre-modern / old school as eternal safe formats and give us a bit of content and your own opinion on them?
Okay, I just want to start by fundamentally disagreeing with the premise of this question that Legacy is in a bad state and WotC fucks up eternal formats for sales. I like Legacy. I think that Delver's a little too good, which we've been saying for months and years if you really want to talk about the Delver shell again, which I don't. But there's some things that seem a little unhealthy, but I love Legacy. I like Endurance. I like Prismatic Ending. I like Force of Negation too. Get wrecked, Bryant. But, like, there's just the idea that it is fucked up or bad because it's different than it was during, like, Innistrad. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't really agree with that premise. I'm not married to an era of these formats, and there's support. Like, pre-modern, old school, like, those don't really appeal to me in the sort of ways that Legacy does, or Modern does, or Vintage does. Like, those are just, like, you have to have friends who play that, and you have to have enough of them that it's interesting to do over and over again. And I've played pre-modern, like when a friend has a deck, like, here, you play Blue-Green Madness, I'll play whatever this is, and like, okay, cool. This was fun for one round, but I don't have the time or energy to invest in a format that is not going to pay me back. And I don't think that Legacy is in such a bad state that I need to pursue some like wild niche thing that was invented by the community. Like, if that's your thing, go for it. There's nothing wrong with those formats, but I have dipped into them in content. I played Penny Dreadful, and I had to turn down a pre-modern because nobody watches that stuff. Like, when I branch out, you might love pre-modern, but it's not a real format that people want to watch. So like, it's a giant spew to spend any amount of content creation effort on that sort of thing. And it's time that I just don't really have. But again, all of that assumes that I hate Legacy and Wizards fucks it up for sales, which I don't agree with either of those foundational premises of the question.
So I'd like to rewind to something that Brian said towards the beginning of that, which is that people are married to certain eras of Legacy that they fall in love with and they feel like it shouldn't change. I had an interesting conversation with Dave Baruta on Twitter last week, where Dave talked about really liking Magic and Legacy as a whole when the format was more stack centric than permanent based, and which is, everyone's allowed to their own opinion, and Dave certainly has a reasonable one. I don't think there's anything wrong with that opinion. That said, if we think back to when Legacy was at its highest, Star City was streaming Sunday Legacy every single weekend. People were loving it, and the format was decent, whatever, Miracles era, but a lot of the interaction was stack based, and there was some permanent based stuff, but for the most part it was spells, Miracles, Storm, etc. And the way that Wizards prints cards is permanents have always been like the way that the game has changed. Like, you went from spells that do things to creatures with those effects, and then creatures with tacked on card advantage. We were always going to get more permanent based. So like that spell based era was definitely something of the 90s, and permanents have been coming ever since that Star City era. So I wouldn't be like, well, it's not what I fell in love with. Even when you were in love with that era was already changing to what we're getting now. Instead of playing Predict, you're playing Icefang Quaddle because it's just that card advantage tacked onto a creature. Or Uro. Like, those things are different from what we had 10 years ago. You're not playing, Concentrate. You're playing Uro or whatever. But it was never going to stay the same to begin with, so it's best to just change and adapt with it.
There's also the rose-colored glasses looking back through nostalgia. Miracles was bullshit. Sensei's Divining Top and Counterbalance, that wasn't good Magic. Survival of the Fittest, just having like a 60+% win rate against the entire Legacy field, that was not good Magic. Like, there was cool stuff happening, but there's still cool stuff happening. And it just... we could spend an episode on this too. This is a deep question. Just the fundamental premise of, since Legacy is ruined, what do you guys think about pre-modern? Like, I just don't think Legacy is ruined, to answer the rest of the question with.
The one thing I want to add that we haven't touched on yet is that it is so much easier to make content for WotC supported formats. If I want to make a Legacy or Modern or Vintage video, I go to Magic Online, I click Join League, and I play against 5 players, and that's that. If I want to go and make like a pre-modern video or something like that, that's me trying to hunt down at minimum one other person, preferably like get 5 other decks, 5 other players or someone with a rental account in there to like try to do that. And let me tell you, cooperative content is way more time consuming than you think, especially if you start getting things like other people's audio involved. All right. Our next question comes from DuoCat, who asks, what's the hardest skill to learn when you're new to formats like Legacy and Vintage?
How to mulligan.
That's a good one.
That's fair. Isolating the hardest skill to learn, I guess that is the knowing the card pool and what all the decks do. I think that is like, if you're stepping out of standard and it's like, holy crap, what is this? Like in my videos, I get a lot of comments that are like, my opponent led on some weird creature and I just named like 35 of the cards of their deck based on that weird creature. It's like, oh yeah, only one deck in all of Magic's history has played. I'm trying to think of some example, and I like can't even. It's just like, but it happens all the time. It's like,
Tireless Tribe hits play. What is your opponent playing?
Right, yeah, it's like Dredge or Cephalid Breakfast, like that. Like that's the sort of thing. Like you just see these little things, and you go down these branches of like, okay, I can guess half their deck and their general strategy based on this one drop or this land they played. Like, wait, why is City of Brass in play right now? What deck would need access to that in 2021? Like, that is, I think, the deepest thing to stepping into a higher power format.
The thing that comes to mind for me is when not to do something. So, for example, when can I afford to not Force of Will this spell? I think those sorts of things that come from like matchup experience and really knowing the ins and outs are hard to learn. Like a lot of times when I'm recording a vintage video, I'll hit a decision point and I'm like, I don't have the reps to know whether or not I need to counter this or whatever. A lot of those things just take raw time and experience, and you can't just like instantly latch on to those sorts of things.
And that is a sub skill of the knowing what all the cards and decks do macro skill at the end of the day. And I think everything mostly will be. Like, do I Wasteland? Do I not Wasteland? Do I Daze? Do I not Daze? Do I play around Daze? Like, all of those are just subsets of the what do all the decks do question.
I have gotten so many comments on my videos that go along the lines of, you forgot to Wasteland. No. No, I didn't. I'm playing towards my out of drawing this 4-drop in my deck, and I need this mana more than my opponent does.
Yeah, since you brought it up, I have gone on it kind of a like savage spree of just like presenting. I went for a long time ignoring just like blatantly aggressive play, quote unquote. I don't even know, like better lines that the comments found than me. And once in a while, it's like, oh yeah, you're right, I did miss that. Like, sure, I'm not perfect, but I had like a really aggressive one that was like, you had Animate Dead and Pact of Negation in your hand. Why didn't you go for the World Gorger? And I'm just like, there was a Relic of Progenitus in play. My $500 playoff with Kai, there was a turn where I cast Ponder, he cast Pact of Negation. He had exactly 5 lands in play, and 2 of them were tapped, and they were like, you know there's a Back to Basics on top of your deck. Just Abundant Harvest, name non-land, jam Back to Basics, and you win. 3 or 4 different people pointed out that line, and I'm like, I had Aethersworn Canonist in play. I had already cast a spell. Like, just, yeah, chill. I don't know how we got on that, but that was tickling the back of my brain. It's been an aggressive week from the commenters who are just like not interested in acknowledging the permanents that are on board.
I had a pretty funny comment this week, which was, and this is the direct quote, LOL, you didn't read a single card in this video. Like, I didn't know that was like a baseline for making Magic content, that you just need to read every card as it's played. Like, maybe other content creators do this. I don't, so watch somebody else.
All right, our next question. This is from the Mind Chasm. What major flags do you use to read a metagame? Do you focus on individual warping cards or broader data? Mr. Spreadsheet, you wanna cover this one?
Sure. Well, as Phil alluded to, I'm someone that just looks at data. I look at Magic a lot like I look at fantasy baseball. Look for trends, look for things that are, statistical anomalies, and then just like try to find a good sample size and find some meaning out of it. That said, sometimes the data doesn't give you anything, and you just have to, make an educated guess based on the weekend. A lot of those Star City grinders just make good guesses and then spike. Sometimes that's what you need to do as well.
Yep. If the metagame is warping around a particular card, that's probably a slightly unhealthy metagame. Like, I think that we might be around there with Ragavan currently. Like, if your deck doesn't have a good plan to Ragavan, or you have lots of great spells it can steal or no early answers to it, that's probably not a deck you should play in this metagame. But yeah, I do the same thing as Bryant, probably less formally than him. I just sort of pull up Goldfish and see what the front page of the metagame looks like. I'm not in spreadsheets or anything. I'm not studying win rates. Like I just kind of know what I need to beat and make sure my deck can do it.
And also at the same time, like while learning the meta and knowing the meta is important, like the card pool in Legacy is stupid big. So make sure you don't tunnel vision on just beating 2 decks and then you lose to the person who like goes, haha, Knight of the Reliquary, go big, big.
Yeah, Anurag just yesterday top forward or top 8. He did well in the PTQ with his 4-color expressive iteration, miracles, Bant, whatever that is, monstrosity. And he tweeted, like, I beat Delver a bunch of times, lost to Rug, Aloran, and Urza Echo. It's like, well, you didn't plan for those? What's wrong, man? You didn't read the metagame right? Like, come on. It's Legacy. Stuff's going to happen.
Tom Hep makes fun of me for that. I build my sideboards in a lot of my decks to beat the winner's metagame. He's like, but what happens when you face Infect around 10? And I'm like, my plan is that I don't. Like, sometimes you just lose to, somebody having a good event. But also, like, I don't think you're supposed to prepare for everything.
Yeah, and that we've talked about this before, too. That's a deck selection choice. A deck like the Epic Storm that really needs to dedicate specific answers to specific problems, and you have limited deck space because so much of your deck space is your core combo. Like, that's a totally different thing. You have to make a meta call and stick to it and hope it hits. A deck like Bant that just has 4 Swords to Plowshares, 4 Prismatic Endings, 6 Force of Wills, you have flex slots you can wiggle around with. Like, you don't have to play 3 Endurance, you don't have to play 3 Uro, you can put some Teferis or Narcissins in the deck. Like, you can wiggle around and you'll have game against everyone, which is a deck selection choice. Like, a perfectly tuned Epic Storm list will probably win more tournaments than a perfectly tuned Bant list, but Bant's not going to lose to, like, whatever the fuck tribal stompy they run into in round 3 or whatever, which the Epic Storm just might not have a plan for that weekend. And that's all just part of metagaming and deck selection.
All right, our next one here. What's an archetype you think is underplayed or underexplored? This is from Expedition Map. I'll start here then. So I think there's 2. I think right when the new cards like Nettle Cyst came out, we saw this huge resurgence of affinity, and then it just like dropped off the face of the earth because everyone was playing like Meltdowns and stuff. And I think some of that has died down, and so if you wanted to be messing around with affinity again and see if you could tune that stuff to be better and competitive, that's a reasonable place. And I also think these like blue-white human adjacent decks might have something real there. I don't know, like I've got 1 league under my belt and the deck felt really good. That might be worth exploring more if you are an Aether Vial sort of player.
I'm going to go ahead and disagree a little bit with you, Phil. So yesterday when playing in the PTQ, I had been boarding in Abrupt Decay all day versus Delver decks, and I said, I haven't seen a single Null Rod yet. I should check Goldfish. I looked at the top 12 deck lists. 1 out of those 12 had Null Rod in it. And I go, that's pretty weird. However, they all had 1 to 2 copies of Meltdown still. Which I agree with you, it's a little bit weird considering how Affinity has mostly disappeared. But the Delver players, at least online, haven't adjusted to that. They're all still playing a bunch of Meltdowns. So
are they just accepting that for Urza Saga, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, Bant's playing 2 Dress Downs main and sometimes another in the board. Like, you have to beat Saga, and you have to do it with 1 card, and Meltdown is still the best thing to do that.
As for the actual question, I don't know if I have a good answer. Maybe the Hammer Time deck, because I think that deck could actually have potential, but no one's really trying out there.
Yeah, as far as underexplored, I feel like I do a lot of exploring through the donation deck model. And a lot of the times what happens is I'm just like pretty stoked about a 4-1. I got away with something here, but at the end of the day, your deck really does have to hang with Days Ragavan or Doomsday. So underexplored is tough to really define or go down that road. Underplayed, though, I don't think enough people are playing Doomsday.
Agreed.
Even though it is top of tier 1, flirting with S tier. Like, I think it is one of the best decks in Legacy, and people are out there playing it. You see it all the time, and I still think it's underplayed. I think that deck is better than anyone, except the people who have hitched their wagon to Doomsday. Like, those people are on the right level with it, but I think that Doomsday is not played enough, even though it is played a lot.
I know some Doomsday experts, and I've had to listen to their complaints recently of, oh, this effing opponent had Torpor Orb. And it's like, about time. Like, you Doomsday people have been getting away with it for months for free, and now people are adapting to you. How's it feel? Tell me, how's it feel? Come on.
Yeah, for sure. You're circling back to the metagame questions and stuff. You gotta have real play against Doomsday if you want to play Legacy these days. Either beat them first or have multiple different types of interaction. And again, that circles back to a deck like Bant just being solid against everything without really warping my deck. I played against Kai in that playoff. I literally pulled the first 75 off Goldfish. I did no tuning for Doomsday, and the deck just had 3 dress down, 4 endurance, and 6 forces in it. It's like, okay, we'll just play it like this. And if you really want to beat Doomsday, you could be playing Teferi or Meddling Mage or things that really shut them down. Or Torpor Orb, Tocatli Honor Guard was mentioned in our last episode. Like, have a plan for Doomsday, because that deck's gonna get you if you're not serious about beating it.
And then when you look at Doomsday, they don't actually play answers for things. There's 1 Massacre and 1 Fatal Push. There are 0 outs to Torpor Orb in the deck. Doomsday looks to beat you by using 8 blue forces, 4 days, and then 3 discard spells. So you have to get your thing to resolve, which is going to be very difficult, but once you do, you're golden.
And the Sheldock Isle still dips around Torpor Orb if they're on that plan, which Kai was in our playoff. I know he likes that. Just hardcast Emrakul is a nice sideboard plan against most of the things that beat Thassa's Oracle.
All right. Our next question is from Xander for All, who asks, how do you feel about proxy legacy events at the local level?
100%.
That should be universal and standard.
Yep. We all love it. Next question. What are some common... does anyone actually want to say anything? Because I think we're all just like so...
What's left to say? Let people play.
All right. Next. What are some common issues you see with legacy players, especially the ones you've coached? And this is from James again.
I asked for a follow-up on this. I asked if he meant issues like personality-wise or play-wise or both. Because we've already touched on one of the issues I see with legacy players as human beings, which is like that you're a jerk if you call a judge mentality. Like I can respect not talking to cops, but judges aren't cops. They're actually there to help. Like, call the judge if there's a concern. Some of the issues I see with legacy players in legacy tournaments are just sort of this, like, feeling like we're still playing at the kitchen table, even though we're in a sanctioned tournament with judges and prizes. Like that. But I don't think that's what James was asking, but I snuck it in anyway.
So one issue that I've seen through coaching specifically is there used to be these like unwritten rules of legacy from 2008 that some people are still very married to now. Like those, like times have not changed. For example, you cast Preordain, then you cast Ponder, then you cast Brainstorm. That is not proper sequencing in 2021. Like, games are contextual. Sometimes one cantrip is better than another. Just play to what the game dictates, not just this rule that someone told you that was inaccurate.
I suppose if I was going to add one, and keep in mind I'm mostly done like D&T coaching, not being able to answer the question, why did you do that? Or why do you want to do that? Well, I think a lot of people, when they're newer to a deck or they're newer to Legacy, they have rough plans, but they're not able to maybe articulate well, like, why do you want to play Stoneforge over Thalia, or vice versa. And I think a lot of newer Legacy players who, are trying to make those level ups can't quite articulate why they want to do the things they do. And sometimes that's from a lack of understanding, or sometimes that's just because, like, they've never been asked to actually do so before.
Yeah, that's a great learning tool in general. I do that all the time, and just make the case. What if, even if the hand is like basic plains, Thalia, no other 2-drop. It's like, why'd you play Thalia there? It's like, because I didn't have another 2-drop. Okay, good answer. Like, just get in the idea that you should be thinking about what you're doing before you do it. And even in my own content, I'm constantly just like describing the correct play 1 second after I made a different one. And it really just takes like 1 second of take a breath, assess the board. It's okay. Casting spells just because you can is usually not right. Is slow down, I guess, is the thing. In my coaching, I've definitely seen people, like I had a client who stuck a standstill on a stable board, and he was just like, fuck yeah, time to party, and then immediately cast a spell into his own standstill on the next turn. See, like not keeping all of the information where it needs to be. Like, the information was, okay, my opponent can't cast spells now. How do I capitalize on this? And then just cast a spell into his own standstill, which is obviously a brain fart. He knew immediately what he did. Hopefully he hasn't done it again since, but it's just like, you got to track this stuff, and slowing down will help you track it.
All right, so the next one is a question for Phil, but this person is happy to hear everyone's opinion. In recent weeks, we've seen 80-card Yorion Death and Taxes rise to the top. They have personally loved it and found a lot of success, but they wonder if it's a passing fad that will be adapted to, or is 80-card Yorion Death and Taxes here to stay?
I think the easiest way to put this is, moving forward, Yorion should be something that is in your pile of cards that you actively consider for the deck. I know personally I'm not super interested in playing Yorion in any deck, more or less. I don't love what Yorion does to your deck building constraints, and for those times where, like, I have one card that I need to draw this turn or I am dead, playing to your outs, those sorts of situations, the Yorion builds often end up being a lot worse for those sorts of things. There are great benefits to playing Yorion, and like, if I was testing for a tournament, I would be testing Yorion and non-Yorion builds both. I don't love the Yorion versions of the deck personally.
I think I mentioned this last week, but I love them. Thank you for showing me that you were playing Death and Taxes. Please continue doing so. Big fan.
Yeah, that is a huge cost.
Yeah, definitely. It's just like, remember Gataxian Probe? Here it is. Take a look. I'm on Death and Taxes. But yeah, as the Fair Blue representative to this commission, I will say that the Yorion build is much scarier than the 60-card build. Just that end game of Vial up to 5, Vial in Solitude, put Yorion in hand, Vial in Yorion, flicker my Solitude, pick up Yorion with Karakas. Like, that shit is scary, and the traditionally built Bant decks can't beat it. The updated Bant build that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I built largely specifically with Yorion Taxes in the front of my head with decisions I made building that deck, because I do think that Yorion Taxes is one of the holes in the way stock Bant is built right now.
One other thing I will add, though, if you are playing in a metagame where there is a lot of Death and Taxes, you probably want to be playing the Yorion, because if your opponent has an extra card and you don't, and the games go real long, things can get spooky.
For sure.
Alright, the next one. What is one card each of you wish would work in Legacy that isn't quite there or maybe needs more support? And this is from Zachary Issam.
Ooh, a long pause. None of us seem to have a quick answer to this available. And I think that this circles back to the since Legacy sucks question, kind of. Insofar as, like, you're asking this question of 3 people who play the format that exists, not a format that doesn't. And just wishing that a card, like, I don't have a pet card. Like, I miss taking people to Browntown with Monastery Mentor, but I understand that's not really front and center to the format right now. And it might still have life in it somewhere, but I don't have just like, oh, I wish I could build a Helix Pinnacle deck that was just viable. I have nothing like that.
It's not for me personally, but growing up, I played a lot of Magic with Adam Barnello, And Adam had a stack of paradigm shifts, and he would always repeat, "This card's going to be broken one day." And we were all just like, "Sure, dude. Yeah." Like, it had the potential to always be broken. They printed Thassa's Oracle, and it's still not the best thing you can do with Oracle. So sometimes you have these grand plans for cards that you wish were playable, and then they're still just not the best thing you can be doing. So don't build that hype up for yourself.
I wish the Douthie Voidwalker decks were better, because I think Douthie Voidwalker is a really cool and really fun Magic card. But notice I'm using cool and fun as my adjectives here. That's a card that I thought was going to be a little bit better than it was, and then I started playing with it and was like,
But why isn't it white, Phil? White deserves everything. White is
White
entitled to
gets
rest in
nothing.
peace, Bear.
It's okay. They'll give me like a black color shifted Thalia in this new Innistrad set, right? And then I could play like black white taxes and have 8 of them.
That sounds great.
I would
Dead
love it.
Thalia. Next question, also from Zachary Isom. The question of format health comes up quickly after a powerful card is introduced to the format these days. Has this reaction of format health always come up this quickly and vehemently, or was Legacy slower to rage back in 2013? Well, Twitter wasn't quite as much of a thing in 2013. I think that's the problem. I think less than the format players freaking out more quickly, you just have more people who have a bigger platform to make noise on. And these questions are kind of skewed because we asked for mailbag questions on Twitter. So that's where you're getting a lot of these hot takes. Like the survey is biased based on the group that was surveyed. And I just think that if it was 2013 and we had like some Star City Opens and stuff, like I think the heat around Ragavan would be lower. I think that probably Bob Wong and Dan Gottschall would be winning Star City Opens left and right with Ragavan, while the rest of the format is still trying to play decks from 3 months ago. And it would be as chalked up to just those guys being sickos to Ragavan being broken. But the Twitter access, Twitter community, and general more open to banning philosophy in general. Banning was like a rare thing that was done in dire circumstances for most of Magic's history, and then starting a couple years ago, it was just like, yeah, we'll just ban 6 cards out of Standard, whatever. Like the history of cards being banned in Standard was like Jace and Stoneforge. And then you have to go all the way back to like 2004 and you get the Affinity stuff. And I don't even know what was banned before that in Standard. Probably something out of Urza Block. There was not a lot of Standard banning until recently. And then they're just like, yep, Fires of Invention, Oko, Uro, Field of the Dead. Just all of these cards just getting chucked. Just banning is much more on the table. Yeah, Reflector Mage. Rampaging Ferostodon banned in Standard, by the way. Yeah, there's just like a lot of things that.
Do you remember the Gideon metagame? They're like, well, it rotates out in 6 months. Like, that was just like what everyone accepted.
Yep. Ride it out, folks. Yeah, it's just like, yeah, and I think that's okay because in the past, Magic was printed for Standard and Limited, and those of us in high-powered formats understood that sometimes cards would get banned, and that's how you manage. You can't test for everything, and I don't expect Wizards to test for Legacy. If they print Underworld Breach and it's cool for Modern and cool for Vintage, but too good for Legacy, like, yeah, good run. Just ban it. Not a big deal. But now cards are printed for Commander and for Limited instead of for Standard and Limited. So now Standard is just subject to that. If it's a problem, we'll ban it mentality. And just seeing more bans lets people think that calling for bans is more on the table, and it actually is. So it's not out of line.
There's also the fact that the way that Magic is played is very different from 2013 as well, where like you had one event every weekend that mattered and things were just slower. Nowadays you have several large events every week. There's leagues that people collect data on, and the information that we have is just so much greater than what we had in 2013. So the pace of deck development, I can't talk right now, moves a lot quicker. And back then you had the source, which was just a bunch of people on a forum, making hypotheses without actual data. So just how things have changed, I guess, is my point.
All right. Our next one is, what are the most overrated cards in Legacy sideboards and/or are relics of old formats?
Surgical Extraction.
This is from
Welcome to your second appearance.
Soyo Romulus.
Yeah, I think Surgical Extraction is a card that used to be just every Legacy sideboard started with 2, unless you were doing something really specific, like being a combo deck. But yeah, that card, I just don't really see it anymore. I think Endurance is doing a lot of the work that it was doing in at least my style of deck. Or other cards like Fairy Macabre have been adopted to play around days or other forms of interaction. Just Surgical isn't what it once was. It might also be because black isn't what it once was, but Surgical's only kind of a black card. So what do you guys think?
From the combo perspective, Flusterstorm. It's a card that I feared for the better part of a decade, and now, like, one is a lot of copies to find in somebody's 75. It's just, like, kind of crazy, if they're playing any at all.
Mine is Carpet of Flowers. Like, we spent so much of last year just saying, like, this is the best sideboard card in the format, you should be playing this, it's so good in the blue mirrors, it's so good versus Delver. And now, just, like, 1 mana, Prismatic Ending, get rid of it. It's in some of the Delver decks, it's in these Dragon Rage Channeler Mush decks, it's in the Bant decks. Like, it's everywhere, and that advantage is just not nearly as consistent as it used to be.
So this is like a sub-question for the two of you. Do you think that people do enough experimenting when copying and pasting deck lists? Because we get people's full 75s published to Goldfish. So when researching decks, I find that people just like literally play somebody else's 75, and then you get a string of them, like 6 or 7 of the same 75 without any adjustments. Do you think people
absolutely
should
those
change?
Filthy net deckers.
I mean, I love it. But do you think those people should experiment more with like changing out bad sideboard cards? Or is it just like, yeah, this person did well, it's still doing well, let's all play the same 75?
That is a tough question. Should is like a really heavy word to ascribe to like any situation. Should this is kind of like, should uneducated people be casting votes? Like like if you really want to like chase this wider question down to its end, like, should a random person who is like, oh, there's a PTQ, I'll play Legacy, whatever, should that person be changing the stock Delver list that's been crushing in the hands of Gul'Dakat or whoever for the last 3 weeks? Probably not. Like, should someone who has done their, like, should Gul'Dakat adjust his sideboard for his expected metagame? Absolutely. Like, should is tough. Like, oh, why aren't there any Surgicals in this deck? I'll add 2. Like, that's the sort of thing that I think a rando just pulling a list would think. But there's probably a reason that Gul'Dakat is not playing Surgical Extraction. So, like, should is tough in that spot.
I think so much of it comes down to, like, how much time do you have and how invested are you really in Legacy? Like, do you actually know what you're talking about? You know, people like the 3 of us who are playing just absolutely so much Legacy, we're well experienced in tournaments, we have the pulse on the metagame, all that sort of stuff. Like, yeah, we can probably futz with sideboards and do better than the average posted 75. But is the guy who's playing Thursday Legacy once a week at his local store going to do better by building his own list or by just grabbing one off a recent, PTQ top 8 or whatever? Yeah, they're probably going to do better with the stock net decked list.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, our next question is from Memory Adrift, who asks, what decks function well without reserve list cards?
Death and Taxes.
Yeah, that's the easy one. That's the slam dunk one. If you want like a top tier or very close to it deck at any given time and you don't want to use reserve list cards, that's the one. There are other decks that don't use reserved lists, but in a vacuum, if you were to, make a tier list of the non-reserve list decks, like Death and Taxes probably comes up at the top of that most of the time.
Oops,
a lot
all
of the
spells. That's the second one.
Yeah, it's tough because a lot of the decks that you would think right away, like, Dredge or Belcher, like, no, those are Lion's Eye Diamond decks. And there's just always something, like, Green-White Loam, like, Mox Diamond deck, sorry, there's Savannah's in that deck. Like, there's always some reserve list creeping around somewhere. as far as decks that can be played with reduced reserve list cards, there are the things I just said. Like, if you own a set of LEDs, there are a number of decks that you can play without dipping too far into the reserve list beyond it. I actually posted a Peer into the Abyss Storm list on my channel this week and market it as budget legacy because you don't need LEDs. And the comments were big mad because you do still need 4 dual lands. They're like, how can you call this budget when there's Underground Sea in the list? It's like, you're saving 2k on LEDs. You're welcome. There are like some places you can go if you just have like 4 or 5 dual lands or just LEDs and no duals, but Death and Taxes is basically the only real deck without reserve list in it.
As someone who has visited the Abyss many of times, I will tell you, it's lovely all year round. You should definitely watch Brian's video.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I was impressed by that deck. And Marcus Ewald at Truckus, who is like partially responsible for developing that list, posted a really slow, interesting version on Twitter that he would have played in the PTQ if he were able to play it. And it basically just has like Lotus Petal and Dark Ritual as fast mana, and it has like 4 forces, 4 predicts, 4 Peer into the Abyss, and it's just like a blue-black control deck that's just like, so at some point I'll peer. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. Brian's shaking his head, but I don't need to get into Storm Theory right now. It was just like, there are cool things you can do. Circling back to the unexplored space, like follow people like Marcus if you want to check out some unexplored stuff. Callum Smith also at White Faces, just really digging into those cool different archetypes.
All right, our next one is kind of a deep and heavy question. This is from Min of MinMax blog. Given real-life jobs, significant others, and other pulls in life, how do you balance your stringent regimen of quality content creation with the other aspects of your life?
I don't sleep enough. That's the honest answer.
So, it's really hard. I can't tell you like, oh yeah, it's just this one easy trick, and then everything balances out. It ends up looking like, get home from work, record a match, eat dinner, see what the girlfriend's doing. All right, I've got an hour. I can squeeze in 4 matches. All right, hang out with the girlfriend. All right, she's going to do something on her phone for 5 minutes. I'm going to pop into the other room and get this video processing. Oh, I woke up on Saturday morning. Okay, I should probably record a league. It's hard. Like right now, I'm releasing content five days a week, and I have to make sure that I leave time for my girlfriend. Otherwise, like, I could very easily just, like, go into recording mode and just, like, bust out videos. One of the reasons why I've had to let some things go. Like, I used to stream, and I don't remember the last time I physically booted up my stream to interact live with people, just because trying to squeeze in all the content that I'm doing is so much easier if I can stop and start.
Yeah, not streaming. I mean, it's been almost 2 years since I went live on stream, and that's for a reason. Like, that was a major shift I made, breaking free of that streaming schedule. And I've already mentioned how I work my recording queue to work in time where I need to lay out the content in order that makes sense. Like, all of that is part of the balance. And I have something that kind of resembles a daily schedule that I stick to, and you need to be able to prioritize and put things in the fuck it bucket when you need to. Like, if you're just burnt, maybe you just don't record a video that day. Like, it'll be okay. Come back tomorrow, refresh yourself. If you're miserable, it's gonna show through in the content, and it's not gonna be fun. My girlfriend and I usually one of us will cook dinner, and then we'll like sit and eat it together, and then hang out and watch TV or movies or whatever for the rest of the night. And that's my hard cap on I'm done making content for the evening. Like, if I come home, get home from work around 4, if I'm feeling it, I'll record a couple of matches, maybe get a whole video in before dinner time around 6 or 7. And if it's done by then, good job. If it's not, I'll revisit it tomorrow, because that's the cap. And you just have to set these lines that you don't cross. And if the priorities change, like I mentioned at the top, that my day job's getting kind of tiresome. I'm looking to change my day job to one that's more accommodating of letting me do this. And there's a lot at play there, but generally it's prioritizing things, and I would basically rank my home life with my girlfriend above making sure I have a video queued out for 3 weeks or whatever.
I also just like respect my mental health more than anything else. So like I've had a really busy 2 weeks because school is just starting up, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take off Memorial Day. I'm just like not gonna post a video that day. Like add 1 day to my buffer, and like I've started playing Dungeons and Dragons just so I make sure that I like that's another activity that I wanted to do specifically so that I could be spending more time with my significant other. Because as of a few weeks ago, that was just something she would do every week, where, you know, she would disappear for 6 hours, and it was like, okay, this is my recording time. And then I realized, like, oh man, this is a huge chunk of time I'm not spending together with my girlfriend on our weekends when she's free. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I started doing that, was to spend more time with her.
It's a good call.
So going back to my comment about not sleeping enough, like the two of you, I juggle, you know, having a relationship along with content creation where we make dinner, we watch a couple episodes of TV, I might go record a league. Once I'm done with that, mine are admittedly much shorter than yours, I'll go watch some more TV with the wife. She falls asleep around 10. I'll come back, I'll finish editing, processing, uploading. Then I have to do all the YouTube stuff, writing the descriptions, editing the captions, because the captions love to autocorrect storm to another word. And
what word is that, by the way?
I'll let Brian say it because he thought it was pretty funny.
Welcome to the epicsperm.com. What's up, sperm fans?
Yep. And so I have to go through and edit all of the captions for every video now. And by the time I'm done, it's like 1 a.m., 1:30. And then I have to wake up and be ready for work by 8. I run on average 5.5, 6 hours of sleep, and then I recharge on the weekends. So I'm drained a lot of the time, but like, I know, content creation's a grind.
All right, let's cut this off here before this turns into a whole episode, because like as 3 content creators, we could go on for a while. All right, the next one is also from the Mind Chasm. How many iterations of a brew do you go through before you can be reasonably sure it has potential?
1. I think like you get a lot of like, hey, is this playable or does this have legs the first time you play it? And if you adjust it and play it in another league and it's still not like slightly better than it was before, it's probably not very good.
Also, again, this depends on your definition of potential. Like, could I go 2-2 at F&M and have fun doing it? You could figure out that potential pretty quick. And the fun of that deck could be iterating on it. And that is the joy that gets you. If your goal is to win and it's fun for you to win, I'm usually like a one and done. Or even sometimes just theory crafting the list. It's like, yeah, I don't see how this will beat like Delver Days on the play. Thus, it is unplayable. And again, like, are you a brewer? Are you going to get joy out of brewing? Or are you a person who wants to win and you're going to be mad that you're losing? And that'll completely change the answer to the question.
You will get the most information about a specific 75 from the first league or 2 you play with it. Like, so often doing like the donation deck list model, like I can play 5 rounds with a league and I will know like what the biggest problems are with the deck almost immediately. And the answer is usually like, oh, the mana was bad. So you get so much information about the potential of a deck list and its biggest issues in your first league. Now, if you're going like real deep, like, all right, I am preparing for this GP, that's when you can start like spreadsheeting, tracking data, you know, do your sideboard mapping and stuff like that, and it becomes a much more involved process.
Also, these answers came from 3 people who have already indicated through earlier questions that we have that legacy understanding, the fundamental building block understanding of like, oh, there's Tireless Tribe, they're on Dredge or Cephalid Breakfast. Like, if you have that, you can get where you need to go a lot quicker on a brew. If you are just approaching legacy from 0, you should probably not be trying to brew yet at all. And just some amount of space in between. Make sure you know what True North is. Like, play 4 or 5 leagues with Delver before you even try to mess around with anything else. Like, make sure you understand legacy.
All right, I'm going to summarize the next question. The next question is from Ryan Johnston, who essentially asks, there's no legacy in my area. What do I do?
We've
What
already
advice
answered
do you
this. 100% proxy locals. Do it.
Yeah, it usually starts out with you and one other person playing, and then you have an extra deck with you, and then you hand that to someone else, and they start trying it out. You know, it's like trying to hook someone on some illicit drugs or something. First taste is free, kid. Get over here. Try some Belcher. Like, look, you can win on turn 1. It's cool. Oh, you like that? Well, let me show you some other things.
Yeah, this comes from the grassroots. If nobody is interested, it's probably largely because they don't know that it's there or they don't think it's accessible to them. A really cool thing I saw someone doing when Modern was first unveiled was they printed out basically numbered lists. It was like 1 through 8 on a little square that slid into a sleeve, and each number was a different deck. So you could sleeve up 175, and you could just say, like, I'm playing deck number 4 this time. And then, like, whatever the 4th line was on each card, it's like, this is Amulet Titan. Now, without switching decks or sleeving anything new, I'm playing deck number 2, which is Blue-Red Delver. And you could just, like, fit a million decks into a single sleeved pile and really get a lot of reps with a lot of different experiences. There's a lot of prep work up front to make sure you set it up right, but that is a cool way to just expose people to Legacy.
Star City Games in Roanoke didn't have local Legacy events for a long time, and so it ended up like me and a handful of other people setting up a like full proxy Legacy league, and I think we ran that twice, and then we had enough interest to actually get like in-person Legacy local events. So it was 100% player driven. Like, get the interest, and the store will be happy to take your money.
Yeah, and the Phil summarized the question, but the person said that EDH and Standard are what's being played. Look for the people who are pushing the boundaries of EDH. Look for that strong pod, the one that's like really trying to smash each other. The people who are like Wheel of Fortuning with Niv Mizzet and stuff. And like, hey, you can do this as a competitive format. You don't have to navigate the EDH politics. Like, we do play to win over here. Let me show you some ideas on how you could do that. Like, maybe that's a place you could go.
Want to still use those hull breachers?
Yeah, they're still legal where I come from.
All right. We do this next one kind of time to time over the podcast. But from Jacob H., let's just make it singular. What's your favorite Magic memory? Casually or competitively? Just one that comes to mind, because like I know we all have so many.
I won the finals of a Star City Open by casting a lethal grape shot, 1 at Vendilion Click and 20 at my opponent.
Did they have worship in play, or were you just stunting for the camera?
Showboating.
Okay, all right. That's fair.
So, one that I don't think I've mentioned, because it was kind of earlier on in my competitive career, I remember showing up, like, I drove like 45 minutes to go to a local Legacy event, and I saw there was like an underpriced slabbed Caracas in the case, and this was before my Death and Taxes deck was quite done. And so I paid $50 for this Caracas, asked the like owner, hey, do you have a way I can open this? And he just like hands me a pocket knife and a screwdriver, and he says, yeah, go nuts. And so it's like 10 minutes before this event starts, and I'm sitting there like hammering away trying to de-slab. It was actually 2 of them. De-slab 2 Caracases for my deck. It was just like the silly like early tournament years sorts of things. I'll always smile at that.
Last year I bought a Japanese foil Snapcaster that was graded 8.5, and I had to watch like 4 or 5 videos on how to open up a graded case before I could actually open it. They're not easy.
Oh, it was not pretty.
Absolute bloodbath.
All right,
how about
Brian,
you, Brian?
You have one?
I mean, again, this is so heavy, but I will choose a memory more adjacent to Magic, like the friendships we make along the way, the gathering. My friend Chris, he likes to ad-lib stupid little songs, where he'll just like sing about whatever's happening in front of him. And at one point, I compiled his greatest hits into an album and just sang the album for him, and to great applause. And we still reference some of his greatest hits, like Packs or Picks, Picks or Packs, and other stupid songs. And that's just a thing that me and that group of people will have that I'm sure nobody else thinks is funny. Listening to this podcast, you're like, what the fuck is he talking about? But I promise it's great to me, and it's a really warm memory.
So the next question is from Victor. Is there a greater prestige in winning paper events compared to Magic Online or arena events of the same size? Victor.
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, I think this is one of those subjective things for sure.
Yeah, like I will travel 8 hours for a Legacy Grand Prix, or I'll like get on a plane or whatever. Like I'll make that happen. But I don't even log in for the Saturday and Sunday Moto challenges because I don't care. And that's not because they're not respectable events or not because they don't have good prizes. It's just like, that is not important to me. But I know there are other people who just love to post the most all-time MTGO challenge top 8, top 10 list. Like, I believe Bryant is somewhere near that list, if not on it. And then Eco Baronin and Guldakat, like those guys, like it's just two different economies. And I think that people like me who value paper events over any Magic Online event should probably adjust our expectations with the continued crawl of COVID ruining organized play for the second year in a row, and just the shift towards esports and arena. Like, I've spent the last year genuinely, like, somewhere in my head I've been like, wow, it sucks there's no PTQs anymore. But there literally is. There's one every single month on arena, and then Magic Online runs them pretty regularly too, and they just don't register in my brain. So it depends on who you ask.
They're also different sizes, right? Like the challenges in a Grand Prix. Just wanted to call that out. But yeah, I think like a lot of this question's from, if you read Reddit, there's a lot of people that are like, paper's the real metagame. And like they just don't accept Magic Online results. And I think Legacy, some of both. Like, Moto largely impacts what people are playing, but not all the time. So, just make good judgments.
All right. So, Bryant, the next one is aimed directly at you from Metalfish. You've probably answered this already, but thoughts on Consider taking over the Bauble slot in Modern Lotus Breach?
A lot of people across all formats are really excited for Consider. I know like Doomsday players are pretty stoked right now. The card's insane. But
for our audio listeners, can you give us a summary of what the card does?
Oh, of course. So 1 blue for an instant. You can look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard, aka almost surveil, draw a card. So with Doomsday, you can create a pile that wins with a single mana with no other cards in hand. So if you're in this weird circumstance, you can consider away Deep Analysis, draw Lion's Eye Diamond, flash it back into Petal Oracle, win the game. Well, in Lotus Breach, we play Bauble as this like free spell that, it helps fill your graveyard. It draws a card. Like, that's just what it's there for. But I don't think you'd want to cut Bauble. A lot of people want to for budget considerations, but I'm just not someone that plays with those in mind. So I'd be looking to cut something like Sleight of Hand or potentially Serum Visions, whatever you're looking to do. But I would not cut Bauble. Bauble's just insane.
All right. So Brian says he's going to answer the next one in 30 seconds, so we'll time him.
I'm going to try. I'll probably need 30 seconds to read the question. But this is from the Real SAFCON. They made an extremely long Reddit post really fleshing out their thoughts on this. You can go find that on the Legacy Reddit if you want. I'm going to boil it down. Do you think Universes Beyond and Secret Lairs are breaking Magic lore and aesthetics in a harmful way? Will it cause a community schism between people attracted to Magic for high fantasy and the people who came for Fortnite? What might this community schism look like? Is the future community-oriented ban lists and formats independent of WotC sanctioning? Well, I think that anything that brings people into Magic is fine. And I think that those people who learned about Magic because of Fortnite are going to quickly realize there's only those 6 Fortnite cards or whatever out of the Secret Lair. And then they'll either get with the high fantasy or they'll leave. And I don't think anyone's going to be like making up their own Fortnite sets and demanding a side community. Is the future of community-oriented ban lists and formats? Didn't we already answer a question earlier on about, since Legacy sucks, why don't you play Postmodern or Penny Dreadful or Old School? This is already happening. And this is not a schism. It's not a problem. I think if people want to play old school, they can do that. If people want to play casual 60s, they can do that. If people want to play Commander, like, it doesn't matter. People have always played Magic in different ways for the entirety of Magic's time. And I don't think that we're going to get some, like, steampunk offshoot that only play with modern-looking secret layers or anything like that. And I don't think that's going to break the Magic community any more than it is already a bunch of different pockets of people just enjoying the game how they choose to enjoy it. Like, I don't have a problem with any of these things.
Brian, I thought Rick, Steadfast Leader, was going to destroy the game.
I thought it was the change to the legendary rule. I thought wait, wasn't it supposed to be the introduction of Planeswalkers?
I mean, Mana Burn just dumbed down the game so much when they got rid of that.
Oh yeah, that's
and
right.
Removing damage from the stack.
That was the final straw.
And before that, putting damage on the stack.
Or maybe it was that other time they changed the legendary rule again. Or wait, changing the borders on the cards? That was it too.
Yeah, the legend frame in Dominaria is an abomination. So, for real, we're being a little flippant about this, but Magic has changed a lot over the years, and it's more popular than it's ever been. And I think that we're not going to have, like, Magic, the game engine. Like, if you want to play with cards from before Modern, you can do that. You want to play old school, you can do that. You want to play with commons, whatever. You can do that. You already can do that. Nothing's going to stop people from doing that in the future. And I'm sure there are people who have home rules where it's like, you know, you start with 10 cards in hand, you can play as many lands as you want, draw 5 cards a turn. Like, whatever. If that's what you want to do with your Magic cards, have fun. Like, I just don't see any problem with what's going on here. And if some kids jump in because they like Fortnite, good for them.
There's also just so many people out there that don't even know about this stuff. Like, I have a coworker that messaged me last week and they're like, "Hey, I found my old Magic cards and I got really into looking up how much they're worth and selling them, but it ultimately just made me want to buy more. So now I just have this brand new deck I bought." And I'm like, "Oh, what format is it?" And they're like, "Format." I'm like, "Oh, so is it just a casual deck?" He's like, "Oh, there's definitely no rules. I just bought cards I liked."
Yeah, for sure. There you go.
Yeah, this is the thing I didn't understand for so long, because I jumped into the competitive rabbit hole and went to an LGS almost immediately. You know, the vast majority of people who play Magic don't know all the rules. They don't know what the stack is. They've probably never been into a game store. You know, so many people are playing at their kitchen table with 2, 3, 4 other friends, and they're just having a good time playing with the cards. They've never thought of these issues that are ruining the community.
I think I mentioned some flavor of this in the past episode or two, but having built into Commander over quarantine, I have 2 decks that I consider casual. Like, one of them I consider casual and one I consider even more casual. And they are both just absolutely slaughtering at an actual casual table. Like, as a competitive player trying to build for casual, using specific metrics in mind, there's no 2-card combos, there's no tutors, just these things that make sense to me on a power level scale. You sit down and it's literally people who bought a precon and they might have switched out 2 or 3 cards from booster packs they opened.
I added the Crawworm to my deck. It's so big.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people who bought a Commander precon know better than Crawworm at this point.
Yeah, fair.
But the point is I built Bosch Iron Golem. I built it to function, but it doesn't go off. There's no combo. It's just a red artifact value deck. But it still has Ancient Tomb, City of Traders, Mishra's Workshop. It's got good cards in it. And I'm playing, if you sit down at a random EDH table at your LGS, so there's a good chance that person is less than $100 into Magic. They bought the Commander deck. They might have bought a pack of sleeves to put it in and maybe a couple packs and switched a few cards out. And that's what they got. The idea of Gaia's Cradle is just what the hell is that? And it's just oh, I have 4 foils in my Legacy deck and have for years. And it's just, there's just these different pockets and they're doing different things. And I think getting caught up in the Twitter drama or what Magic is on some sort of existential philosophical level, I think you're missing the beautiful forest for some individual trees there. Magic is a great game. If you just get out and play it and stop talking about it on Twitter, and on Reddit and going down these click holes with people who agree with you. And like, if you just actually sit down at your LGS and play some Magic, you're going to refresh yourself and have a good time and worry less about stuff like this.
All right, this is from Rick, who asks, "Hi, really enjoying the podcast. Only started listening recently. Got out of playing Commander, but still like the idea of singleton formats. So I got into the various 1v1 formats, the Highlander ones that exist, be it Canadian, Australian, or European. Do any of you have experience with these formats or any interest in them?"
I play some EDH. I don't know what all these other things are. Like, I've heard of Canadian Highlander, but basically don't know what any of it is. And so I guess the answer is no to both interest and experience for me.
We've already mentioned this a few times, but like, we are all content creators. A lot of these formats just like aren't supported and not a lot of people play them. I'm actually familiar with both Australian and Canadian, but why would I choose to spend time playing these when I could just like play Pauper or anything else that I can play on Magic Online? There's just so many options for Magic nowadays. Play whatever makes you happy. That's like my honest suggestion. If you find joy in one of these Highlander formats, go for it. Like, whatever makes your boat float, go ahead and do that.
As far as content creators go, I believe Doogs on Twitch did mess around with the Australian Highlander formats quite a bit. So if you look at their website, greensunzenith.com, or maybe hit them up on Twitter, at Doogs on Twitch, Douges, you could probably find some information that way.
All right. So the next one is from Monolith MTG. Yo, where did the pizza content go?
I don't know, Brian. Is Friday still pizza day? The best day of the week?
Yes, Brian. It's obviously still the best day of the week. We just don't talk about it anymore. Over the summer, we quit grilling the pizzas. We just exclusively do them inside now. They just taste better when they're in the oven. I don't know. Like, they cook better.
Yeah, it's true.
So
yeah, that's definitely true. Once the novelty of grilling a pizza wears off, it's clearly better in an oven.
Pizza day is tomorrow for me. Admittedly, I'm just ordering pizzas for all the D&D nerds, but the pizza content is still here. It's just become a smaller part of the metagame of this podcast.
So Monday is your honorary pizza day? Like, that seems a little bit weird considering how it's supposed to be Friday, but like, I'm down.
Yeah, Monday is supposed to be hot dogs.
Yeah.
If you have ever listened to the song, the whole menu is laid out for the week, and you're breaking the cycle. But it is a day off, so I guess you're not subject to the school lunch calendar.
Yeah.
As far as my pizza content goes, I got into HelloFresh, like the meal kits that just get delivered to your house and then you cook them. And there's not a lot of pizza in those. My girlfriend and I, we basically order out or go out to dinner once a week and then cook for ourselves the other 6 days. And I have not actually cooked a pizza for myself in a while, though pizza is still in our normal rotation for the 1 day a week we order out. So there's less pizza going on in my life in general.
We were invited for a couple double date this week. They're like, hey, do you want to go out Friday night? And I looked at Beth and she goes, no, Friday's pizza day. Like, it is law around here.
Yeah, that's good. Like we said in the other question about maintaining life balance, you need to set some hard rules and stick to them. And Friday is pizza day, the best day of the week.
All right. So our next one comes from Reeplecheap, who asks, do you enjoy playing board games or card games with your significant other?
Yes, but like, once again, Brian has mentioned how people are like competitively very different. We are fairly basic and we love Settlers of Catan. However, my wife does not care if she wins or loses. She just enjoys playing, and it's just not who I am. So sometimes I need to dial back my own competitiveness to make it more fun for everyone. I mean, not everyone grows up playing these like hyper competitive games, right? Or even video games. Sometimes people just play for the experience. So you need to adjust yourself.
Yeah, my girlfriend does not have a mind for math or like and strategy is new. Like, she's never had to strategize. Didn't even play like team sports where like positioning the players on the field and stuff was part of strategy, and you learn that sort of tacitly as you go. So she likes word games. We really like Codenames, Scrabble. There's a game called I forget what it's called, but basically it's a trivia game where all of the other players are shouting questions at you, and you have to answer one of them verbally. You have to spell the answer to another one with like boggle cubes, and then you have to like write down the answer to the other person while there's a timer running that you are in charge of keeping track of. It's basically about like staying cool under trivia barrage. I'll try to look it up and think of the name because it's a lot of fun. She likes that one. We do have a number of games in the rotation, but any like the drafters, the deck builders like Ascension or Dominion, all that, like we've tried and it's a no effing way. Like that is not in her wheelhouse and she's not interested to learn. But I also like word games, so it's not a problem.
It's really hard for me to enjoy playing a competitive game with my girlfriend, sort of for similar reasons. Like I love things like Dominion and Ascension, but you know, it's a bloodbath if we play together. So we try to play more cooperative games, whether it's on the Switch or, you know, a board or card game. So we do a lot of crossword puzzles together. We do trivia together. We played Gloomhaven, which was like Dungeons and Dragons in a box, essentially, where most of the stuff is kind of like prepackaged for you. And like we played that through that campaign over the better portion of like maybe a year and a half. So we love playing games together, but we kind of have to choose carefully and find something that will be fun for both of us.
All right, so Mike Noble asked a very important question that I think it's pretty crucial that we answer. What is each host's favorite Blink-182 song? For those of you unaware, Mike responded to our survey for donating to charity with a different Blink-182 song for every question. So I think it would mean a lot to Mike if we answered this. I believe that Brian is a big fan, so Brian, you can go first.
And it's hard to pick a favorite. It, again, depends on the mood. Like, am I just feeling silly? Do I want to like feel emotions? Do I want to reflect on life? There's so many to offer, but I think I would have to go with the classic All the Small Things if we're just like, you know, which one is on my playlist of songs I won't skip. The real answer to that, I don't actually have any Blink-182 songs on my master playlist where I just dump any song that I won't skip and I let it run when I'm driving. But I do have the Puddles Pity Party, the like sad clown who sings beautifully. I don't know if you guys know about this guy, but he was on like America's Got Talent and he sang Chandeliers, just like in full character as this like sad clown, and it was gorgeous. But he's a thing. Check it out, Puddles Pity Party. But he has a cover of All the Small Things that is on that rotation.
Well, Enema of the State was probably the first CD I ever fell in love with, and I don't think there's a single song on there that I would ever skip. That said, they're not in my regular rotation at this point in my life, but like Brian, I find it's kind of hard to pick just one song, so I'm going to list two. Going Away to College, being young, that song definitely hit me in the right spot. And then I'm growing up, I love the American Pie movie, so every time I look for you, just like the first time I heard that song open up the movie, I was just like, this movie's going to be awesome. So, big fan.
And as far as me, I don't think I could have named a single Blink-182 song off the top of my head. So, abstain.
I actually saw Blink like 3 years ago. They were on a tour and a bunch of the Magic friends decided they were going to go together. Like me and one other couple were like pretty excited about it. And a bunch of our other friends were like, yeah, whatever, it's a thing to do. And my friend Chris, who I mentioned, the perennial curmudgeon, was like, yep, can't wait to stand here for an hour waiting for them to play their 2 songs that I know. And it turned out that like of their 12 or 13 song set, like 11 of them were like pretty big radio rotation over the last 20 years. They have a lot of songs that you might not even notice were them, or you don't come to the front of your mind right away. But
oh yeah, I'm 100% sure if I Googled a list of their songs, I would know a bunch of them. But like,
for sure, you would.
I was not tuned into this as a band.
I know
Fair
that
enough.
Mike is a pretty big fan of Happy Holidays, You Bastard. So if you're a listener and you don't know that song, definitely go listen to Happy Holidays, You Bastard.
Not bad. Funny story, just like in the last 3 weeks, my girlfriend realized that Take Off Your Pants and Jacket was a pun, like a play on words. That's one of their album titles, and it's written like pants and jacket, like your outer layer of clothing, but obviously if you whip off your pants and jacket, it means something else. So she, like weeks ago, she was like, oh my god.
All right, and that will take us to the final question of the evening, which is from StarFox444, who asks, what is Tasha's most heinous characteristic?
Her personality.
Yeah, she is
that
mean.
makes sense, yeah. Don't
Good
think
episode,
it could be
boys.
anything else, honestly.
Yep. Let's wrap it up. No love for Tasha here.
All right. Thank you all for listening to our mailbag episode. I hope you gained something out of it, maybe multiple somethings. If you ever have any questions or want to drop us a line, hit us up on Twitter. Otherwise, we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Get out there, battle in some Legacy.